Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Myths and Stuff. I'm so glad you're here. If you're new, my name is Liesel. I'm 15 and a huge nerd about Greek mythology. I made this podcast because I literally cannot talk about Greek mythology with anybody in my life, especially if I want to have a real conversation and not just be tested on my knowledge. I hope you guys are all doing well. If you can't tell, I am not. I am coming down with a cold or something, and you can really tell by my voice. It was coming on last week, but now it's like in full swing and you can tell. But yeah, hopefully this will go away soon, and hopefully it isn't too noticeable when listening back on a podcast. But anyway, on to the actual content and myth of this week. This week, we will be focusing on Hades and his underworld. I have mixed feelings about Hades because, for one, he's misunderstood. Like, just because he's the god of the underworld doesn't mean he sucks. But on the other hand, I hate the whole Persephone thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you're in the right place. Welcome to this episode of Myths and Stuff, Hades and his underworld. What's Persephone doing here? Now, if you have listened to my first episode, or just have a basic understanding of Greek mythology, you know that Hades is technically the eldest brother of the big three, Zeus, Poseidon, and himself. And when they were deciding which earthly domains each of them got to rule over, Hades got stuck with the underworld. Now, this isn't necessarily a horrible deal, considering he owns everything underneath the ground, meaning he owns all the gems and jewels down there, basically meaning he's loaded. But still, he's stuck with the bad connotations of being the god of death. Hades is also one of the only gods that does not live on Mount Olympus with his family. He made his palace in the underworld, where he rules. Now, we can't talk about Hades without knowing exactly what the underworld is like. The underworld, or sometimes just called Hades, is where everyone goes once they die. The underworld is almost always characterized as dark and gloomy with little light. There are also many rivers in Hades, including the infamous river Styx. Gods usually swear oaths upon this river, and it is most commonly referred to as the one Charon rolls your soul over to reach the underworld. There is also the Acron, the river of misery, the Phlegethon, the river of blazing fire, the Coctitus, the river of wailing, and the Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. So basically, when you die, according to the ancient Greeks, Hermes, the messenger god, transports your soul into the underworld, but not straight to it. To actually enter the underworld, you must cross the river Styx. There are a few entrances, but this one is most commonly used. And to do that, you need Charon. Charon basically shuttles people's souls over the river Styx in a boat, or the Acron depending on the myth, but he will only take you if you give him a gold coin, or a drachma. And to have a gold coin, you need to be buried with one. And people were usually buried with theirs placed in their mouth. But if you didn't get buried with one, sorry, but you're out of luck unless you can find another entrance. You then go to get your soul judged. On your way, though, you pass under the gates of the underworld, which are guarded by the three-headed dog Cerberus. Cerberus was briefly mentioned in the first episode as being the child of Echidna and Typhon. If you're entering the gates, then no problem. Cerberus will leave you be. But if you attempt to leave the underworld, especially if you're dead, Cerberus will stop you from doing so. Once you pass under the gates, there are 3 underworld judges you will face: King Minos, King Rhadamanthus, and King Aeacus, who were all, surprise, sons of Zeus. Depending on how the judges judge your life, you will be sent to one of 3 places. The first place you could be sent to is the Apostle Fields, or the Apostle Meadows. The fields are basically where all the normal people go. It's kind of like the medium place from the good place, you know? Like if you weren't a hero who defeated monsters, but you also didn't kill your entire family, you'd end up here. People can't really decide what exactly it's like here, just that it's kind of mediocre. Some myths even go as far to say that everyone sent here takes a drink from the Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, so they lose their identities. Next are the fields of punishment. If the Apostle Meadows were the medium place, then this is the bad place. Everyone sent here has done something evil or bad. For example, Tantalus is here. Tantalus was Zeus's son, and he, trying to test the god's all-knowingness, killed and boiled his son Pelops and served his body disguised as food to the gods, because this was a fantastic idea. The gods obviously knew what was up, besides Demeter, who was too distraught over her daughter being stolen, which we will get into later in this episode, and she unknowingly took a bite of Pelops' shoulder. The gods were angry because killing your family was a huge no-no, even back then, so they got Clotho, one of the Fates, to bring Pelops back to life. The boy was perfectly fine afterwards, besides the fact that part of his shoulder was missing, in Demeter's stomach, but Hephaestus made him a new one, so it was fine. Tantalus was then punished in the fields of punishment. He was forced to stand in a creek bed with perfectly drinkable water, and with low-hanging fruit right above him. The only thing was, if Tantalus reached down to the water to drink something, the water would shrink right out of his reach. Same with the fruit. If he attempted to reach up to grab a piece of fruit, the fruit would be pulled up right out of his reach. And that's just one of the examples of the people in the fields of punishment, but there are definitely more. Lastly is Elysium, where all the heroes go. It's the good place. It's an amazing utopia where heroes of all kinds can live out the rest of eternity, unless, that is, they don't decide to get reborn. See, if you're so great and get into Elysium, you can choose to get reborn as a mortal and try life again. But why? Why would anybody do that when they've already did so well the first time? Because if you get reborn 2 times, meaning you've lived 3 lives, and you get into Elysium every time, you get into the Isle of the Blessed. Some myths say that's in Elysium, some even say it's in the mortal world, but one thing's for sure, it's for the best of the best, and it is an amazing place to live out the rest of eternity. Okay, so we cannot talk about Hades and the Underworld without talking about the wonderful Persephone. If you remember from last week's episode, Persephone is the daughter of Zeus and Demeter and the goddess of spring, but she is also the queen of the Underworld. Growing up, Demeter would never let anyone, god or mortal, lay a finger on Persephone. She was her daughter, youthful and innocent, and Demeter didn't want anyone to ruin that for her, which was completely fair. And almost every god respected that, not because they were decent human beings who didn't want to take a woman who didn't want it, but because they were scared of what Demeter would do to them. But Hades, being a man, fell in love with Persephone because she was beautiful, and he just had to have her. Because, yeah. He knew, though, that Demeter would not have it. Neither would Persephone. So he pined away in peace, watching her in secret, weird, and wishing for Demeter to magically decide Persephone could marry him. But as time went on, it got harder and harder for Hades to live without Persephone. Again, he just had to have her. Like, dude, we get you have a crush, but just write about it in your diary and forget about them like everybody else does. Unfortunately, he didn't, though. Hades went to Zeus for advice on what to do, and Zeus was honored that Hades had come to him. He told Hades, just like, kidnap her, dude. That's what I usually do when it works out fine. Probably not that direct or nonchalant, but you get the idea. So Hades forged a plan. One day, while Persephone was out in a meadow picking flowers with her nymphs that protected her, the nymphs grew tired and decided to take a nap. But Persephone did not want to go to sleep, so instead she continued to frolic around and pick flowers. And then Hades' plan went into motion. As Persephone was picking flowers, Zeus would make new and prettier ones sprout up farther and farther away, making a trail for Persephone to follow until she was out of earshot and away from the nymphs. Once she was far enough away, Hades sprang on her. The ground underneath Persephone's feet cracked open, and Hades on his chariot swept her way into the underworld. Persephone was devastated when she found out where she was stolen to and who she was stolen by. Persephone, goddess of spring, daughter of the goddess of the harvest, was stuck in the underworld, a place full of darkness and death. She cried and cried for Hades to release her, but he refused. Meanwhile, though, Demeter was on Earth searching and searching for her beloved daughter. After Persephone had been kidnapped, none of the nymphs could say where she had gone because they had been sleeping, but one goddess, who was in a nearby cave at the time, could. When Persephone was kidnapped, Hades thought her to be alone, but actually the goddess of magic and spells, Hecate, had heard Persephone scream. Hecate saw Demeter looking for Persephone and connected the dots. She told Demeter what she had heard, but they couldn't decide exactly what that meant. Hecate didn't see Hades take Persephone after all. As far as they knew, any god could have stolen her away. Demeter, with Hecate's help, searched all over the world for her daughter, but her search was in vain. Persephone was in the Underworld, and without that knowledge, Demeter would never be able to reunite with her daughter. But all hope is not yet lost, for Helios, the god and personification of the sun, knows where Persephone is. See, every day Helios rides a sun chariot around the entire earth, because he's literally the sun. And on the day Persephone was kidnapped, Helios was making his usual rounds, and he saw Hades steal Persephone. Now, instead of being helpful, Helios decided to keep this information to himself and not tell Demeter, because of course. But one day, he was at a mortal tavern and was babbling about the crazy stories he saw when on a sun chariot. And of course, he told the one about the god of death, Hades, kidnapping Demeter's daughter, Persephone. And while word got around about what Helios was saying, and Demeter confronted him, Helios told Demeter everything he had seen, and Demeter was furious. She went up to Olympus to talk to her brother, and Persephone's father, Zeus. Zeus told Demeter that actually he had given Hades his blessing, and that he had given Hades the idea to kidnap Persephone in the first place. Now Demeter was even more furious. How could Zeus have done that and not even tell her? Demeter told Zeus that if he did not go to the underworld and tell Hades to give her back her daughter at once, then she would starve the entire world. Zeus told Demeter that he couldn't do that, and that Hades got to keep Persephone, which is disgusting. No man ever should get to keep a girl. So, keeping with her promise, Demeter froze the entire world, making it so no crops would grow. Many mortals died because they had no way to grow food. Zeus begged for Demeter to stop, to free the world from this drought of food. But Demeter stood strong, refusing to let crops grow until she had Persephone back. Which is completely fair. No man should ever be allowed to kidnap a woman and be free of the consequences. After a while, Zeus was fed up. Not because he cared for the mortals, of course not, but because if there were no people and no food, no one would be able to worship and make sacrifices to the gods. So he got Hermes to go down to the underworld to bring Persephone back to her home and her mother. While this was all happening above ground, in the underworld, things were going badly for Persephone. She was sad, lonely, and homesick. Again, she was the goddess of spring, her mother the goddess of harvest. She was constantly surrounded by bright, living things, so the transition to the dark underworld could not have been easy for her. She was relentless in her asking to be freed, but Hades still refused. Persephone stuck to her room, refusing to eat. She knew that if she did, she would be forced to stay. Reasons for this are basically impossible to find, but yeah. Basically, if you eat anything in the underworld or any food from the underworld, you're forced to stay there forever. One day, though, Persephone finally came out of her room and decided to roam the palace where she was being held captive, because staying in her room 24/7 must have gotten very boring and old very, very fast. As she was walking around, Persephone found a garden. It was beautiful. It reminded her of home. It was a place where in the depths of death there was light. As she was looking around, she saw a pomegranate tree, and Persephone was starving. She hadn't eaten in ages, and being a god, she couldn't die or anything, but she could still very much feel hunger. And she took a fruit and started to eat it. But as she was, Hades came up to her, and she hid the fruit behind her back. Hades was with Hermes, and he looked incredibly sad, but he was glad to see her out of her room, and he told her he had news. Hades told her everything that had happened with Demeter, her mother. He told her that she was looking for her, and that once she found out she had taken Persephone, she was furious and was refusing to let crops grow while Persephone was still in the underworld. Hades said that after many mortals started to starve to death, Zeus was finally making Hades give up what he had stolen. What he had stolen being an actual person, so boo-hoo. I have no sympathy for Hades here. Hermes then butted in to tell Persephone that he was there to take her back to her mother, but he had to make sure of a few things beforehand. More importantly, he had to make sure that Persephone had not eaten anything. When Hermes asked Persephone if she had eaten anything while she was in the underworld, Persephone froze. She had just eaten the pomegranate because she was starving and had finally given in to the hunger, and didn't know whether to lie to Hermes or not. Unfortunately, Persephone never got to decide what to do, because the gardener had been secretly watching her and he saw her eat the pomegranate. When Hermes asked this question, he came out of his hiding place and appeared in front of the gods. The gardener told them what he had seen Persephone do, and when Hermes asked him to prove it, he showed them the half-eaten pomegranate in Persephone's hands. Everyone knew what this meant. Persephone was going to have to stay in the underworld forever because of what she had done. Hermes flew back up to Mount Olympus and relayed the news to Zeus and Demeter. Demeter was heartbroken and told Zeus that if he made Persephone stay in the underworld, she was going to continue to starve the mortals until they were all dead. Zeus told Demeter that there was nothing he could do, that rules were rules. Demeter and Zeus continued to argue and argue until finally, Hestia, goddess of the hearth, came up with a solution. See, Persephone did not eat the entire pomegranate. She had about 1/3 of it. So, Hestia said, Persephone should have to stay in the underworld for 1/3 of the year. The other 2/3 she was permitted to stay above ground with her mother. All, Zeus, Demeter, and Hades, agreed to this deal. But during the months where Persephone was with Hades, Demeter would refuse to let anything grow, which is why, during 1/3 of the year, also known as winter, no crops can grow and it's cold. But during the summer, when Persephone is above ground, the weather is pleasant and warm and crops can grow. And that, everyone, brings us to the end of this episode. As always, I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry it's on the longer side. There is just so much to talk about when it comes to the underworld, especially with Persephone and Hades. Which, by the way, I absolutely hate when people romanticize their relationship. I cannot stress this enough. It is not cute. It is not a coffee shop meet cute. It is straight up kidnapping, and any book that makes it seem like they are in love is completely incorrect. And if they are in love, it's straight up Stockholm Syndrome. Stop romanticizing sexual assault. It is not cute. Sorry. But I got into a conversation the other day with somebody who was like, oh, I love their story. I love this book about them because their relationship is so cute. Okay, so that's not like exactly what they said, but like it was pretty much along the lines of that. And I just had to sit there and nod, and it made me so angry because, like, again, it's not cute. It is kidnapping. Anyway, as always, please let me know your feedback on this episode. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you haven't already, it would mean the world to me if you checked out the other ones I have out. And yeah, thank you so much, and goodbye.